You feel it, don't you? That weight in your chest when you think about putting yourself first. That familiar tightening when you imagine saying no to someone who expects your yes. The voice that whispers betrayer the moment you consider walking away from someone who drains your very essence. You've carried this weight so long you've forgotten what it feels like to move without it. The guilt has become your master, and somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself this makes you noble. You tell yourself that suffering for others is virtue, that sacrificing your dreams for their comfort is righteousness. But what if I told you that your guilt is not virtue? It's the cage that keeps you powerless while others feast on your loyalty. This guilt isn't accidental. It was installed in you, programmed into your neural pathways through years of conditioning that taught you to prioritize everyone else's peace over your own power. Every time you felt that stab of guilt for choosing yourself, you were experiencing the activation of psychological chains designed to keep you manageable, predictable, exploitable. The guilty conscience that owns you is not your moral compass, it's your weakness being weaponized against you. Look at your life. Really look. How many opportunities have you sacrificed on the altar of not wanting to disappoint someone? How many versions of yourself have you killed to avoid being called selfish? The guilt convinces you that your needs are less important, that your dreams are somehow less worthy than theirs. It whispers that considering your own interests first makes you a monster. But while you've been paralyzed by this manufactured emotion, others have been moving through the world unburdened by such psychological baggage. They sleep soundly after making decisions that serve their evolution. They don't lose sleep over boundaries they've set or bridges they've burned in service of their ascension. The guilt that owns you is foreign to them, not because they're heartless, but because they understand something you've forgotten. That guilt without purpose is just emotional self-harm disguised as morality. You've been convinced that your pain equals your purity, that your suffering validates your worth. This is the cruelest lie ever sold to a conscious mind. The weight in your chest isn't virtue, it's the alarm system of a consciousness that has been hijacked, redirected away from its own interests and toward the service of others' agendas. Every time you feel it, you're experiencing the conflict between your authentic self and the programmed self that was designed to serve. The question isn't whether you're a good person. The question is whether you're going to remain a useful person to everyone except yourself. The guilty conscience that owns you is not protecting anyone. It's preventing you from becoming who you were meant to be before the world taught you to apologize for existing. They taught you that loyalty is sacred, that betrayal is the ultimate sin. From childhood, you absorbed the mythology that those who walk away are villains, that those who choose themselves over others are broken, that commitment means staying even when staying destroys you. You were fed stories of noble sacrifice, of heroes who gave everything for others, of the beautiful tragedy of self-destruction in service of someone else's happiness. But look around you, the winners, the ones who shape reality, who bend the world to their will, who actually create change. Do you think they carry the same chains of guilt you do? The lie runs deeper than you realize. Loyalty, as you were taught to understand it, is not virtue, it's voluntary servitude wrapped in the language of honor. You've been programmed to serve, to sacrifice, to bleed for others' dreams, while your own wither in the shadows of your self-imposed obligations. The sacred loyalty they sold you is nothing more than psychological slavery with a prettier name. Consider the mathematics of your relationships. How many of them are built on the foundation of your consistent self-abandonment? How many people in your life would disappear if you stopped being useful to them? The loyalty you've been taught to worship is often nothing more than mutual dependency, disguised as connection. You give your energy, your time, your dreams, and in return, you receive the temporary comfort of being needed. But being needed and being valued are not the same thing. True loyalty, the kind that actually serves both parties, is chosen, not obligated. It's renewable, not permanent. It exists because it serves mutual evolution, not because it was demanded by guilt or imposed by expectation. But the loyalty you were taught to practice is different. It's unconditional servitude that demands you remain loyal even when the other person has long stopped being loyal to your well-being, your growth, your dreams. The sacred loyalty is a trap. It keeps you bound to people and situations that have outlived their purpose in your life. It prevents you from evolving beyond the roles others have assigned to you. When you examine your life through this lens, you begin to see how many of your choices have been made not from authentic desire, but from the fear of being labeled disloyal, ungrateful, selfish. This is not nobility, this is psychological slavery. The chains are invisible, but they're stronger than iron because you've been convinced to forge them yourself. Every time you stay where you should leave, every time you give when you should receive, every time you sacrifice your authentic self to maintain someone else's comfort, you're participating in your own imprisonment. The lie of sacred loyalty has convinced you that your freedom threatens others, when in reality, your freedom might be the only thing that can save you both. There exists a different breed of human, one who moves through the world unburdened by the emotional shackles that bind you. They wake up and their first thought isn't about who they might disappoint today. They make decisions based on strategic benefit rather than emotional obligation. They don't ask permission to prioritize themselves. They don't apologize for their ambition. When they cut ties, they do so with surgical precision, no trembling hands, no sleepless nights, no extended explanations to justify their choices. Watch them carefully. These are the people who actually change the world, who build empires, who bend reality to their vision. They don't carry the crushing weight of everyone else's expectations. They don't negotiate their self-worth with people who have no investment in their success. When they commit, it's because the commitment serves their evolution. When they withdraw, it's because the situation no longer aligns with their trajectory. This isn't sociopathy, this is emotional sovereignty. The difference between them and you isn't that they lack feeling. It's that they've learned to feel without being controlled by those feelings. They understand that emotions are information, not instructions. They can experience guilt without being paralyzed by it, feel loyalty without being enslaved by it, recognize love without being diminished by it. You can learn to think like them. The capacity for this transformation exists within you right now, buried beneath layers of conditioning that taught you to apologize for your own existence. The guilt-free mind isn't born. It's cultivated through the systematic rejection of programming that serves others at your expense. It's developed through the recognition that your emotional reactions have been weaponized against you. The process begins with a simple shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "How will this affect others?" you learn to ask, "How will this serve my evolution?" Instead of "What will they think?" you ask, "What will this create?" The guilt-free mind operates from a different set of assumptions about reality. It assumes that your needs matter, that your dreams are worthy of pursuit, that your time and energy are valuable resources that should be invested, not squandered. This transformation isn't about becoming heartless, it's about becoming strategically hearted. It's about learning to love from a position of strength rather than weakness, to commit from choice rather than obligation, to give from abundance rather than depletion. The guilt-free mind understands that you cannot give what you do not have, that you cannot serve others effectively if you're spiritually, emotionally, or mentally bankrupt. They move through the world like water, adaptable, but never losing their essential nature. They can be kind without being weak, generous without being exploited, loyal without being enslaved. This is the mind you were meant to have before the world taught you to feel guilty for existing, before you learned to apologize for taking up space, before you accepted the lie that your worth is measured by your usefulness to others. Niccolo Machiavelli understood what your conditioning refuses to let you see, that the appearance of virtue and actual virtue are two different weapons in the arsenal of power. The prince who governs by pure morality governs briefly, because morality without strategy is just organized weakness. You've been playing by rules that your competitors wrote to keep you weak, to keep you predictable, to keep you serving their interests instead of building your own empire. Machiavelli observed that successful leaders understand the difference between what should be and what is. While you agonize over the ethics of your next move, tormented by guilt over potential consequences, they've already moved 3 steps ahead, unburdened by your moral theater. They understand that in the game of life, intention matters less than outcome, that being good is less important than being effective. The forbidden truth is this: virtue is a luxury that only the powerful can afford. When you're weak, when you're dependent, when you're constantly scrambling to meet others' expectations, virtue becomes a chain that binds you to mediocrity. True virtue, the kind that actually serves the world, can only be practiced from a position of strength, from a foundation of self-sovereignty. Consider the mathematics of your moral choices. How often do your virtuous decisions actually create positive outcomes? How often does your guilt-driven loyalty enable others' dysfunction? How often does your self-sacrifice simply teach people that your needs don't matter? The harsh truth is that your commitment to appearing good often prevents you from doing good, because good intentions without strategic thinking rarely produce beneficial results. Machiavelli's prince understands that sometimes the most moral action is the one that appears immoral to those who prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their weakness. Sometimes the most loving action is to withdraw your support and force them to find their own strength. But this requires the ability to tolerate being misunderstood, to be comfortable with being seen as the villain in someone else's story. The forbidden truth extends beyond political power into every area of life. Your relationships, your career, your personal growth, all of these domains operate according to the same fundamental principle: that effectiveness trumps intention, that results matter more than the purity of your motivations. The world doesn't reward you for your good intentions. It rewards you for your ability to create outcomes that serve your objectives. This doesn't mean becoming ruthless in the sense of being needlessly cruel. It means becoming ruthless in the sense of being willing to make decisions based on what serves your evolution rather than what makes others comfortable. It means understanding that sometimes the most ethical path requires you to disappoint people who have invested in your compliance, to betray expectations that were never fair to begin with. Real betrayal isn't emotional, it's mathematical. It's the calculated severing of ties that no longer serve your evolution. You've been taught to see this as evil, but consider this: every boundary you set betrays someone's expectation of your submission. Every time you choose your path over their comfort, you commit the sin they've trained you to fear. Every moment you prioritize your growth over their convenience, you engage in the betrayal they've programmed you to avoid. The question isn't whether you'll betray, it's whether you'll do it consciously or remain unconscious of the betrayals you're already committing against yourself. Every day you remain in situations that diminish you. Every day you give your energy to people who don't invest in your success. Every day you choose their peace over your power. These are betrayals of the most profound kind. They're betrayals of your potential, your purpose, your authentic self. Strategic betrayal is simply the conscious choice to stop betraying yourself in service of others' comfort. It's the recognition that loyalty without reciprocity is just self-destruction with a prettier name. It's the understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remove yourself from situations where love has become a weapon used against you. The anatomy of strategic betrayal begins with assessment. You examine each relationship, each commitment, each obligation through the lens of energy exchange. What are you investing? What are you receiving? Is this arrangement serving your evolution or stunting it? The ruthless winner doesn't make these assessments with malice. They make them with clarity. The next phase is decision. Once you've identified the relationships and situations that drain more than they give, that demand more than they offer, that expect your loyalty without earning it, the choice becomes mathematical. Do you continue to invest in diminishing returns, or do you redirect your resources toward opportunities that actually serve your growth? The final phase is execution. This is where most people fail, because execution requires the ability to act on your assessments without being paralyzed by guilt, without being manipulated by others' emotional reactions, without being deterred by the temporary discomfort of disappointing people who have grown accustomed to your self-sacrifice. Strategic betrayal is not about becoming heartless, it's about becoming selective with your heart. It's about understanding that your capacity to love, to give, to support others is finite, and that wasting these resources on people who don't reciprocate isn't noble, it's inefficient. The truly powerful understand that their greatest responsibility is to protect their ability to serve from a position of strength rather than weakness. When you betray strategically, you're not destroying relationships, you're revealing which relationships were built on authentic connection and which were built on your consistent self-abandonment. The ones that survive this process become stronger. The ones that don't were never relationships at all, they were arrangements of convenience disguised as connections. Your guilt is not your own, it's installed software, running in the background of your consciousness like a virus that consumes your processing power and redirects your energy towards serving others' agendas. Every time you feel that familiar pang when prioritizing yourself, you're experiencing the activation of control mechanisms designed to keep you in service, to keep you manageable, to keep you useful to everyone except yourself. This programming began early. You were rewarded for compliance and punished for self-assertion. You learned that your worth was measured by your willingness to sacrifice for others, that love was something you earned through self-diminishment. The guilt you feel isn't a natural emotional response, it's a conditioned reaction, carefully cultivated to ensure you remain in service to systems that benefit from your self-neglect. Consider how automatic your guilt responses have become. You don't even question them anymore. Someone makes a request, and before you've even considered whether it serves you, you're already calculating the guilt you'll feel if you refuse. Someone expresses disappointment in your choices, and immediately you begin questioning your right to make those choices. This isn't conscience, this is programming. The truly powerful have either never been programmed with this software, or they've learned to uninstall it completely. They don't wake up wondering who they might disappoint today. They don't make decisions based on managing others' emotional reactions to their choices. They understand that guilt without purpose is just emotional self-harm disguised as virtue. Guilt programming matrix operates through several key mechanisms. First, it teaches you to equate your discomfort with moral wrongdoing. If you feel guilty, the programming suggests you must be doing something wrong. But guilt is often just the resistance you feel when your conditioned responses conflict with your authentic desires. It's the friction between who you were taught to be and who you actually are. Second, the programming teaches you to prioritize others' comfort over your own growth. It whispers that making others uncomfortable with your choices is a form of cruelty, that you're responsible for managing everyone else's emotional reactions to your life. This keeps you trapped in patterns that serve others at your expense. Third, it convinces you that your needs are somehow less important, less urgent, less worthy of attention than everyone else's. The programming suggests that focusing on your own interests is selfish, that true virtue requires self-sacrifice. But this is simply a mechanism to ensure you remain a resource for others to exploit. The process of uninstalling this programming begins with recognition. You must see the guilt for what it is, not moral guidance, but psychological manipulation. You must understand that the discomfort you feel when prioritizing yourself isn't evidence of wrongdoing. It's evidence that you're finally choosing yourself over your conditioning. The guilt isn't protecting anyone, it's preventing you from becoming who you were meant to be. Emotional detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. When you can observe your relationships without the distortion of guilt, obligation, or sentimentality, you see them as they truly are: energy exchanges, power dynamics, mutual utility agreements. Some serve your evolution, others feed on it. The ruthless winner doesn't agonize over this truth. They act on it. The word detachment frightens you because you've been taught that caring means attachment, that love requires emotional entanglement, that connection demands the sacrifice of your objectivity. But detachment is not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of strategic thinking. It's the ability to feel without being controlled by those feelings, to care without being enslaved by that care. Detached observation reveals the mathematics of your relationships. Who invests in your success? Who celebrates your growth? Who supports your evolution, even when it's inconvenient for them? And who only values you for what you provide? Who only supports you when it serves their interests? Who only loves you when you're useful? The emotionally detached mind sees these patterns clearly, without the romantic distortions that keep you bound to arrangements that diminish you. This clarity is terrifying at first, because it reveals how many of your relationships are built on your consistent self-abandonment rather than mutual respect. It shows you how often you've confused being needed with being valued, how frequently you've mistaken dependency for love. But this terror is temporary. Once you adjust to seeing clearly, you can never go back to the comfortable blindness of emotional entanglement. The detachment protocol begins with emotional inventory. You examine each significant relationship in your life and ask the uncomfortable questions. If I stop being useful to this person, would they still want me in their life? If I set boundaries around my time and energy, would they respect them or try to manipulate me into compliance? If I prioritized my own growth, would they support it or resent it? The answers to these questions reveal the true nature of your connections. Some relationships will prove to be genuinely mutual, built on authentic care and respect. Others will reveal themselves as extraction operations, designed to harvest your resources for others' benefit. The detached mind doesn't judge either type, it simply recognizes them for what they are and responds accordingly, understanding that detachment is not coldness, it's strategic warmth. When you're emotionally detached, you can choose to care without being controlled by that care. You can be generous without being exploited, loving without being enslaved, committed without being trapped. Detachment gives you the power to engage with others from a position of choice rather than compulsion, strength rather than weakness. The truly powerful understand that emotional detachment is not about feeling less. It's about feeling more efficiently. They can experience the full spectrum of human emotion without being paralyzed by it, without being manipulated by it, without being diminished by it. They feel deeply, but they think clearly. They care profoundly, but they act strategically. Your presence has become cheap because you've never learned the art of strategic withdrawal. You're always available, always accessible, always ready to drop everything for others' convenience. The guilt-free mind understands that absence creates vacuum, and vacuum creates pull. When you remove yourself from spaces where you're undervalued, you force a recalibration of your worth. Think about the people who have the most impact on your life, the ones whose opinions matter most, whose attention you value. Are they the ones who are always available? Or are they the ones whose time and energy feel precious because they're selectively given? Scarcity creates value. Abundance creates waste. Your constant presence has taught people to waste your time, your energy, your attention, because they know it will always be there. Strategic withdrawal is not punishment, it's education. When you step back from relationships that take you for granted, when you become less available to people who don't, invest in your success, when you stop filling every silence with your voice, you create space for others to recognize your value. But this requires the ability to walk away without looking back, to cut ties without the need for closure, or, Explanation. The power of controlled absence extends beyond personal relationships into every area of your life. In your career, the person who's always saying yes, always available for overtime, always willing to take on extra responsibilities without extra compensation, is rarely the one who gets promoted. They're too useful in their current position to be moved to a better one. Scarcity of your availability forces others to use your time more efficiently, to respect your boundaries, to value your contributions. But mastering strategic withdrawal requires overcoming the guilt programming that tells you that making yourself less available is cruel, that stepping back is abandonment, that setting boundaries is selfishness. The truth is that constant availability is often a form of enabling. It teaches people that your time has no value, that your energy is unlimited, that your needs are irrelevant. The art of strategic withdrawal begins with the recognition that your presence is a gift, not an obligation. You don't owe anyone constant access to your time, energy, or attention. You don't have to be available just because someone wants you to be. You don't have to justify your absence or explain your unavailability. When you master controlled absence, you discover that people pursue what withdraws from them. They value what they cannot easily obtain. They respect what they cannot control. Your strategic withdrawal forces others to confront their own dependency on your consistent availability. And this confrontation often leads to a healthier, more balanced dynamic. The goal isn't to manipulate or punish. It's to create relationships where your presence is appreciated rather than assumed, where your contributions are valued rather than expected, where your time and energy are respected rather than exploited. Strategic withdrawal is simply the conscious choice to remove yourself from situations where your value is not recognized, creating space for arrangements that actually serve your evolution. You've been taught that being feared is evil, that love is the only legitimate foundation for influence. But examine the leaders who actually change the world, who bend reality to their vision, who create lasting impact. They are not loved by everyone. They are respected, and respect often grows from a healthy fear of consequences. When people know you can and will walk away, when they understand that your loyalty is earned rather than assumed, your value multiplies exponentially. Fear, in this context, is not terror. It's respect for your boundaries, recognition of your standards, acknowledgement of your willingness to enforce consequences. The people in your life should understand that disappointing you, taking you for granted, or exploiting your kindness comes with a cost. Not because you're cruel, but because you value yourself enough to protect your energy and time. Consider the difference between the person everyone loves and the person everyone respects. The beloved person is often taken for granted, their kindness exploited, their boundaries ignored. They're loved because they're safe, predictable, unlikely to cause problems or enforce consequences. But the respected person operates differently. Their kindness is precious because it's not guaranteed. Their support is valuable because it must be earned. Their presence is appreciated because it cannot be assumed. This doesn't mean becoming tyrannical or needlessly harsh. It means becoming someone whose standards matter, whose boundaries exist, whose respect must be earned rather than assumed. When people know that crossing their lines has consequences, they're far less likely to cross them. When they understand that taking you for granted might result in losing access to you entirely, they treat you with greater care. Fear as a leadership tool works because it creates clarity. People know where they stand with you. They understand what you will and won't tolerate. They recognize that your kindness is a choice, not a weakness they can exploit. This clarity actually makes relationships easier, not harder, because it eliminates the guesswork, the boundary testing, the gradual erosion of respect that happens when people know they can push you without consequence. The fear you inspire shouldn't be fear of arbitrary punishment or emotional manipulation. It should be fear of losing access to someone valuable, fear of facing the consequences of their own poor choices, fear of the vacuum that your absence would create in their life. This type of fear is actually a form of love. It's the recognition that you matter enough to lose, that your presence is valuable enough to protect. When you become someone whose boundaries matter, whose time is precious, whose respect must be earned, you stop attracting people who want to use you and start attracting people who want to grow with you. The relationship dynamic shifts from extraction to exchange, from exploitation to mutual benefit. This is not cruelty. This is the natural result of self-respect made manifest in your interactions with others. You cannot simply remove the guilt programming, you must replace it with something stronger. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you strip away the old operating system without installing a new one, you'll simply revert to the familiar patterns of self-abandonment. This new operating system runs on self-sovereignty rather than external validation, on strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction, on conscious choice rather than conditioned response. The reconstruction begins with the fundamental assumptions that govern your decision-making. The old system assumed that others' needs were more important than yours, that conflict was to be avoided at all costs, that your worth was measured by your usefulness to others. The new system operates from different premises, that your needs matter, that conflict is often necessary for growth, that your worth is inherent rather than earned through service. Under this new operating system, you begin to see every relationship as a choice rather than an obligation. You understand that commitments are renewable contracts, not permanent bonds. You recognize that loyalty is something you choose to give, not something others are entitled to receive. Every person in your life must earn their position there, and they must continue earning it through their behavior, their respect for your boundaries, their investment in your success. This doesn't mean becoming calculating or mercenary in your relationships. It means becoming conscious of the energy exchanges that define your connections with others. It means understanding that healthy relationships require mutual investment, that love without reciprocity is just exploitation with a prettier name, that supporting others at the expense of your own growth serves no one in the long run. The new operating system also changes how you process guilt. Instead of seeing guilt as moral guidance, you recognize it as programming that may or may not serve your authentic interests. You learn to pause when you feel guilty and ask whether this emotion is protecting something valuable or simply maintaining a pattern that keeps you weak. Often, the guilt you feel when prioritizing yourself is just the old programming trying to reassert control. Your decision-making process becomes more strategic under this new system. Instead of asking, "What will make others happy?" you ask, "What will serve my evolution?" Instead of, "How can I avoid disappointing anyone?" you ask, "How can I create the most value?" Instead of, "What's the nice thing to do?" you ask, "What's the effective thing to do?" This is not becoming heartless, this is becoming strategically hearted. You learn to love from a position of strength rather than weakness, to give from abundance rather than depletion, to support others in ways that actually serve their growth rather than enabling their dysfunction. The new operating system understands that you cannot give what you do not have, that you cannot serve others effectively if you're constantly depleting yourself. The reconstruction of your psychological framework is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing process of choosing the new system over the old one, of reinforcing new patterns while allowing old ones to atrophy. Every time you choose yourself over others' comfort, every time you set a boundary despite the guilt, every time you walk away from a situation that diminishes you, you strengthen the new operating system. The final stage of this transformation is the complete abandonment of apologetic living. You stop explaining your choices to those who didn't earn the right to question them. You stop seeking permission to prioritize your evolution. You stop justifying your boundaries to people who benefit from their absence. When you cut ties, you do so cleanly, without the performative guilt that once held you hostage. Apologetic living is the habit of treating your own choices as if they require others' approval, as if your life is a democracy where everyone gets a vote. But your life is not a democracy, it's a sovereignty, and you are the only legitimate ruler. The people who demand explanations for your choices, who question your right to prioritize yourself, who make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, are not your advisors, they're your usurpers. The transition from apologetic to sovereign living begins with the recognition that you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. Your decisions are not subject to popular vote. Your boundaries are not negotiable terms that others can debate. Your evolution is not a group project that requires consensus. When you fully understand this, the guilt that once paralyzed you begins to lose its power. Living without apology doesn't mean becoming rude or insensitive. It means becoming authentic and unapologetic about that authenticity. It means making decisions based on your own values rather than others' expectations. It means understanding that disappointing people who have invested in your compliance is not cruelty, it's growth. When you stop apologizing for your choices, you stop attracting people who need you to be smaller than you are. You stop enabling others' dependency on your self-sacrifice. You stop participating in relationships that require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. The people who cannot handle your unapologetic authenticity will remove themselves from your life. And this is not a loss, it's a cleansing. This is not cruelty. This is the natural behavior of someone who has remembered their own worth. When you truly understand your value, you protect it. When you recognize your potential, you refuse to waste it on people and situations that don't serve your evolution. When you remember who you were meant to be before the world taught you to apologize for existing, you stop negotiating your right to exist fully. The sovereign life is not about dominating others. It's about refusing to be dominated. It's not about being cruel. It's about being clear. It's not about caring less, it's about caring more efficiently. You become someone who can be kind without being weak, generous without being exploited, loving without being enslaved. You move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and protects it, who understands their value and refuses to waste it, who recognizes their power and wields it wisely. This is not the end of your capacity for connection. It's the beginning of your capacity for authentic connection, built on mutual respect rather than mutual dysfunction, unconscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. The transformation is complete when you no longer feel the need to justify your existence, explain your choices, or apologize for taking up space in the world. You become someone who can walk away without looking back, who can say no without guilt, who can prioritize their own evolution without shame. This is not betrayal. This is finally being loyal to the person you were meant to become.